Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who have experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, Jules, here we go. So we are ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Super excited to have as my guest today, Jules Taylor Shore. Jules, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So Jules is a therapist, author, teacher, and mom who's creating spaces where people can move into more self-compassion, self-trust, empowerment, and integrity. She regularly teaches and speaks to people from all over the world and translates new understandings in neurobiology into practices that can support brain change. She's the author of Setting Boundaries That Stick: How Neurobiology Can Help You Rewire Your Brain to Feel Safe, Connected, and Empowered. Jules, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. And thanks to everybody listening.
Yeah,
time is our most precious resource, right? You are gifting me with your time. So cheers, everybody.
Appreciate that. So before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Right. So I grew up as an American mutt, moving a lot all around the country. I didn't grow up in one spot. The longest I was a place was 2.5 years.
Wow.
So bounced, not military, other stuff going on, but bounced a lot. So to a lot of different states. I've lived in the West Coast. I've lived in the South. I've lived in the Northeast. So lots of different spots. And now what happened is I married a person who's not as nomadic as me in Austin, Texas. And now I've been here for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So I landed, despite myself, in one spot.
Austin. Yeah. Very cool. I've never been there. I've heard a lot of things. And you've been there as what appears to be a change has happened in it.
When I moved here, it was still a small towny sort of feel 20 years ago when I got here. And even when I landed here, people were like, stop moving here. So I was one of the people who invaded the city a long time ago, and it has changed enormously since I've been here. I was telling my husband the other day, I was like, I feel like we moved without moving because the city changed around us so much.
So before we were recording, I mentioned to you how I feel you've kind of distinguished yourself in the field of mental health in terms of focusing what appears to be on boundaries and the neurobiology and how that's impacted and so forth. How did this all start for you, this interest in becoming a therapist? And then we'll get more specifically into boundaries and so forth.
Yeah. So I started doing therapy the way lots of us start, which was by being a client. So this is a second career for me. I did not start out doing this. I have a background in theater. I was a director in New York for a while. I decided that it was really, really, really hard to make a living in that. And I grew up in a family that has a lot of wings in auto industry, and I know how to work on cars. So I left I left New York and was an auto mechanic for a while here, and then was in a really hard space in my own life. I thought therapy was super dumb. I was not ever going to do it, and ended up in desperation because I was so helpless and hopeless in that moment in my life. I did not know what else to do. I did sometimes walk out of my therapist's office telling him, this is dumb and I'm not doing it anymore. And then I would keep showing up the next week. I'm one of those. I'm one of your toughest clients, y'all. Anyway, so I found that over time, it really helped me shift things in ways I didn't think was possible, and recognized my own history of a pretty intense trauma during that time, and was able to really wrap my head around, oh, wait, therapy maybe could be something not just that changes folks or provides a space where change is more possible, but maybe I could do it. So 2 years in, I'm still turning wrenches for a living. And I looked at my therapist, I was like, Patrick, how did you get your job? I think I might want it. And he told me about going to grad school and what you had to do. And I applied and I got in a couple places. And one of them was here in Austin. And so I ended up going to grad school. And then inside of that process, I got really interested in neurobiology. So I went to grad school. I started in '05, '06, something around there. And I'm terrible with dates. My mind does not do time in that way. So sometime around that ish. And back then, or I don't know, maybe it was a pocket in time, or maybe it was my university that I was going to. There were no classes on the brain, which as a mechanic struck me as super weird because I would never ask one of my guys to work on a brake system if they didn't understand how brakes worked. Why are you asking me to help people with their brains if I don't know how a brain works?
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
that led me down a path of pulling in some friend and family contacts who had some connections with Vanderbilt Medical School. And I ended up being able to go and do classes there in the medical
Wow.
program. Corresponded, like not for credit, like just like, oh,
Yeah.
hey, can I come and audit this class? And so I would take in the summers and sometimes at distance would take medical school neuroscience classes. Got really interested in it. I have a sciencey mind. It worked really well with how I think anyway. And so yeah, I went down that path and then ended up in interpersonal neurobiology land studying with Dan Siegel and Bonnie Badenoch for a while. And all of that helped me see how the different techniques we were doing were working. It made it more clear to me, oh, what is it that's changing brains? And so then I ended up really specializing in neurobiology, interpersonal neurobiology in particular, and wanting to help synthesize all this information so that we could help clinicians not have to learn the entire brain, but know enough and particularly translate, oh, here's the research, here's what that might mean clinically. What can we do? And so then I ended up teaching quite a lot, helping people understand how brains work in a way that's a little bit more palatable than
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. When you said initially you were like therapy, no, don't want to do it. You obviously found a therapist, something clicked. What was working for you at that moment?
He costs $5 an hour. And that's how much money I had. Seriously, he was at a community clinic and I got assigned to him. And, I think part of my history led me to be a person who discounts needs or doesn't think about advocating for myself very well, especially not at that time. That's very different now. But I think that history led to I never even questioned, is this working for me? No, it did. And he was awesome. And I'll tell you, I tell my interns this all the time for the people who are studying with me in their postgraduate work. I can look back now that I have quite a lot of trauma training under my belt. I can look back and go, oh yeah, he didn't actually know that much about trauma training. And I can look back and go, oh yeah, I found out later when I graduated, I was his first client ever. He was a practicum student inside of a university. I must have blown his mind, poor sweetie. So he's doing his practicum and internship work, and I'm seeing him. He was a brand new therapist. And I think there were two things that made our work really, really helpful. I was in a domestic violence relationship at that time. and kept moving out and going back into it and moving out and going back into it. And he managed whatever he had to do on the inside, he managed not to judge me for that.
Wow.
And that was huge. I think that was a big piece of our work together, was to be in an environment where I could be honest about what was happening in my life, but not have that kind of shamed, like, what are you doing? Isn't this wrong? Isn't this not healthy on me?
How come you're not leaving?
How come you're not leaving? I think he did that really well.
Wow.
And I think he genuinely cared about my well-being at the same time. And I think that there was a magical combination of that even though maybe he was brand new and he didn't have the skill set and even though there are some trainings or some therapists I've seen later in my life who did have those skill sets, and those were magic experiences for different reasons. I do think, here's the, don't judge people and care, and you'll go a long way.
Right.
In helping someone find their way out of really hard spaces.
Right. Really interesting. So I'm curious about this. Obviously, your what appears to be a passion for neurobiology and boundaries and empowerment. How does all this?
What's invented into that?
How does this mix?
Right. Here's what was happening: is I was just helping my clients face hard realities. I'm a couples therapist. I'm a trauma specialist. Half of my clients are couples who have complex trauma histories. Right. So I was just helping them face hard stuff that is reality in our life that we're not going to get away from. You could take one piece of stimulus from the outside. You could take one thing that happens, and 5 people see it and they have 5 different emotional responses to it. Of course they do. Brains are different because we all live into our histories and we have different DNA that made each brain its own little unique combination. And I'm never going to be able to change that. And you all trying to get that to change, to make people feel more same as you in order to feel safe, is never going to work because they're not same as you. And what if that's okay? Can we build safety while we recognize that? That's how the psychological boundary was born. So I started looking into, what parts of the brain are actually guessing what's happening in other people's minds? Those parts of the brain, so that's the mentalization neural network. That's a spread out network, but its hub is in the superior temporal sulcus and the temporoparietal junction, which is kind of deep in the brain. What language does that part of the brain speak? It speaks image and metaphor, by the way. And what is it listening to? The afferent wiring is actually coming from areas that are listening to your visceral sensations. Wait, so that means that the network in your brain that's guessing really fast, it's got a super fast processing speed, 8 to a 12th of a second. It's guessing really quick what's happening in somebody else. And it's listening to your belly and heart to do it. And it's speaking to you in image and metaphor to let you know what's actually up with them. And then it's happening so fast, you're not putting a pause between that guess and believing that guess to be true. And so that one came out of that. Or here's another hard reality. I want to live in my value system, but my lower brain works at such speed and my triggers happen so fast that sometimes I'm behaving in ways that don't match my value system. What do we do with that? Containing boundary was born. How do we help utilize the neurobiology of compassion, the speed of the basal ganglia, the moral reasoning and quick access of the prefrontal cortex, and tie them together in both a bottom and up and top down process simultaneously? Could you create a practice that activates that so that you can support yourself well, even in triggered moments, even in really reactive moments, even in really hard moments, so that you can put a pause between what you feel and what you do? So that, now I have the choice of maybe doing something that is a little bit more matching of how I want to show up in the world.
Wow. Okay. Let's put
am
this.
I going like blah, blah, blah right now?
No, it's very intense. And I'm wondering for the sake of our listeners, if we can put this into what would this look like when you're working with someone?
Well, it depends on, yes,
Give us
exactly.
an example.
What does all this look like? It depends on which kind of boundary I'm working with. So I talk about four boundaries in my
Pick one.
book. Let's do the containing one because that's the one we just talked about. So that's where I'm going to put a pause between what I feel and what I do. And so if I'm working with somebody who is in my office, they're wanting that skill. The first thing we're going to
The skill
do,
of what?
the skill of putting a pause between what they
Okay.
feel and what they do. I
Okay.
want a containing boundary in my life. I've noticed I have these behaviors. They're not in line with my value system. I want that to change. The first thing I'm going to do is tell them, well, one, of course, it's really hard to put a pause. You have a fast brain on the bottom and a slower brain on top. And the slower brain is where you're going to remember who you are in like a value centered way.
Mm-hmm.
Moral reasoning is integrating up in that third eye position. All that very center part medial prefrontal cortex is doing a lot of your moral reasoning for you. And that's pretty slow compared to that trigger, compared to those feelings. The first thing I'm just going to do is say, guess what? There's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Neurobiologically, we understand exactly why this is happening. No biggie. And also, you want to do something different. Great.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to build that with three tools, and we're going to weave those into a single tool in the end. So the first tool I'm going to do is I'm going to help them find a gesture, a movement in their body that's going to mean to them compassion. In order to find that, what I do is I have them think about somebody who's not too challenging for them, not complex relationships. So sometimes I wouldn't lean towards a partner, maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
towards a boss or something like that. Maybe towards a kid, their own child. Maybe towards a niece or nephew. Maybe towards a dear friend who they have a really good connection with. Let's imagine something hard happened for them. Can you let your body fill up with that feeling of compassion for them? And then can you just notice how your body wants to move when you think about offering them care? And that sometimes will elicit a little bit of a movement for folks. Sometimes what they need is to feel that feeling and then just notice, oh, okay, if I had a movement that meant this feeling to me, what would that movement be? So I've had people, for anybody who's listening, I'm just holding my hands up in front of me and I'm opening them out like I'm holding a bowl. Oh, I've had people go, oh, yeah, it's this. It's like, oh, kindness. Other people, they're like, oh, it's this shoulder thing where I remember I'm about to hug them. Sometimes, oh, sweetie, putting a hand on a heart, right? So sometimes it's different than that. I've had a musician who had this, and their music is all about spreading kindness to the world. And so, of course, that makes sense for them, right? So a gesture that's uniquely yours, that's going to mean to you compassion. Now, why on earth do we want a gesture? Because of the basal ganglia, which is a part in your lower brain. So it's subcortical, way down deep in the middle of your brain. It's wrapped all around your limbic system. And it does procedural movement and the emotional meaning of movement. Mm-hmm. So if I put my fist up to give you a fist bump, right? In a social situation, you don't have to guess that that means camaraderie. If I gave you a high five, you don't have to guess that that means support. You just know what that means. If I put my thumb up in the air or I made little heart hands, nobody has to guess what that means because your basal ganglia already knows the emotional meaning of that movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook in a speedy lower part of the brain to remind us, in real time of compassion.
Now, let me interject here for a second. Why? I mean, I can surmise, but why compassion? Why
because
are we?
Absolutely, because compassion releases GABA, which is an inhibitory neurochemical, into the lower brain. And particularly when you're in self-compassion, because we're going to start pointing it out, but then we're going to learn to point it in. Self-compassion releases GABA in the amygdala, fear processor. the anterior insula, pain interoceptive pain processor, and the anterior cingulate cortex, meaning of pain and meaning of fear processing space. So we're going to release GABA, which is going to go shh, to all of those fear and pain processors by reminding ourselves of self-compassion in real time. Mm-hmm. Right? And we're going to put it at the speed of the basal ganglia. That way we hook a lower brain speed into our containing boundary. So that's part one of it. Right? Part two is remembering a value word. So I have people come up with two value words. One is a value word for who they want to be in their own integrity. And the second is a relational intention value word. That's who they want to be in relationship. And so I do a little exercise with them, which is detailed in my book. If anybody wants to find out more about that, you can access that there. But I lead them through a little exercise and we work with, finding a word that means this is who I want to be. So my personal integrity word is courage. And what I noticed when I was doing my exercise where I pictured myself in a really good moment and I'm trying to describe, who is that person? What is that person like? What are they doing that's so great? Mm-hmm. And I noticed that everything I was describing, it had to have courage as part of it. So courage is the word that reminds me to step into my value system. Right. So we do that exercise. And then the third piece is relational intention word. So that's where I have somebody come up with an example of themselves showing up well with someone they don't know very well, someone who's under them in a power dynamic. So if you're a therapist, like a client, or maybe a parent, like a child, somebody who's dependent on you in a power down sort of situation, and then someone who's a peer. So it could be a partner or a close friend or a work colleague. In all three of these scenarios, I showed up really, really well. Is there a small word or phrase that could remind you of what was the same about each one of those scenarios? Because each one of those scenarios, you showed up with great relational intention. I bet there's something in common with all of them. So these are the ways I help clients find their words. So my word is kindness. And so then I practice hooking that all together. So my gesture is a hand on heart. That reminds me of the compassion. And I remind myself who I am, courage, how I want to be with others, kindness. And there, in a moment, now I could get, for example, like earlier today, I had a moment with my husband. My sweet family has moved recently inside of Austin to a fixer-upper, and we are having some challenging things come up, as is common with those experiences. And he was in a pretty dysregulated state a little earlier today, and everything in me wanted to jump in and manage that. And honestly, he was not doing anything to me. I could just tell he was in distress. He's freaking out a little bit. He's like muttering to himself while writing notes, looking at his phone about something and then writing something else down. And I asked him once, do you need any help with anything? No, I can't right now. He was flooded. Like, okay. And everything in me wanted to go in there and manage that feeling. Right? Because one of the ways I kept myself safer when I was growing up was making sure everybody was okay around me. Right? Instead of doing that, I can notice that impulse and greet it. Courage, kindness. And remember, what is it that's absolutely the kindest thing I could do for him? Is it managing him right now? No. What's the most courageous thing I could do for me? Trust him that he's going to work through this and we're going to come together in a minute and everything's going to be okay. That's me living into my value system. But I really do believe that everybody, whatever you're thinking and feeling, is just you becoming you through time. I shouldn't mess with that. And I can remember that in this moment. And then I went and played Spoons, the card game with my kid. And later on, we came back together and worked through that moment. And he was able then to tell me what was going on in him. Right. And again, I enter that conversation, courage, kindness,
Mhm.
so that I can add some regulation to my low brain so I don't just act from it.
Right.
Right. So I use all
Wow.
these practices in my own life.
Yeah. Well, geez, I'm just hearing an incredible amount, it's like an invitation to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
This whole process is just feels like an invitation to, uh, you know, imagine or think about how we can have, for example, compassion for someone else to in turn have it for ourselves. And
Yes,
it seems like so easy
it is actually
to
way
have it for
easier.
someone else, but I can't have compassion for myself. Are you
Of
joking?
course. And you know what's funny? Neurobiologically, they're actually the same network. It's just pointed
Mm.
a different direction. So don't worry about it. Just turn it on towards somebody else and then work at pointing it towards you. You'll get it over time, little bit by little bit.
I mean, do you feel like let's pull out a little bit here and
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you going into detail about that.
Yeah.
So look at, you talked about interns you're working with. When you look at the state of education for therapists right now,
Mm-hmm.
do you see that this neurobiology being covered presently now in in the culture of therapists and so forth?
A tiny bit more than it was when I went to school, but not by a lot.
Why is it
So
important?
I think it's important in a few different ways. One is I think sometimes our therapy skills are teaching us to work against natural energy and information flows in our brain. And I don't want us to do that. I want us to work
Say more
with.
about that. What do you mean by
I
that?
want us to work with. So, like sometimes I might be taught thought stopping, for example, which is not a bad skill in several different circumstances. But if I'm really hot,
Mm-hmm.
thought stopping, what I'm going to do is activate task positive networks in the brain, the frontal cortex in a more judgment assessment way than in a compassionate way. A lot of the time, when I might use this skill, I might use it in a way that actually activates harshness towards me, like, stop it already. You can feel
Mm-hmm.
that energy. Well, that will give you a wonky uh, outcome because I say wonky because it's nuanced, it's complicated. One is it's probably actually going to work right there in the moment. That's probably true. A lot of times, not 100% of the time, but a lot of times, you know what? You're going to get positive feedback that that thing you just did was a success. And I don't want to discount that. And I don't want to discount the importance of having something like that in your toolbox sometimes.
Right.
And there's no intervention we're going to do that doesn't have both cost and benefit, right? So we've talked about the benefit. Oh, it can be fast acting. Oh, you can get feedback in the moment that big move you just did, it did create a stop. Good for you. Awesome. Great. Here's the only downside though, is you add excitatory neurochemicals to the brain when you're doing assessment in a judgy way. When you are
Mm-hmm.
harsh towards yourself, what you are doing is lighting your lower brain on fire. And I want people to know that so that if that's their choice, great, I trust you. Go forward and make your choice. And also, don't think it's cost free, this kind
Right.
of thing. And I think some of the nuances of how our interventions might be working with the brain is lost when we
Mm-hmm.
don't understand the neurobiology at least a little bit. And I don't think we all need to become neuroscientists. I'm certainly not. And I think insights into this can help us all be really creative in some of the interventions we're even creating ourselves. If I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't looked at the mentalization neural network and understood it was listening to the belly and heart, and speaking image. It's in a part of the brain just speaks image more. I couldn't have created the intervention I used to help people do a psychological boundary. So I think sometimes understanding these neurobiology pieces can help us creatively invent new interventions and test them out. And really, I do mean really test them out. I mean, do an outcome study on your own work and see, is it actually helpful to people? And if so, oh, great. Look at you. You learned to work with your own brain and help people work with their own brains really well. So one is around like, are our interventions working? Do we really understand as well as we can? Because neurobiology is still really new. So, as soon as we learn something, we've then learned something that disproves the thing we thought we just understood. So let's not get away from ourselves. Let's keep in correct humility around where we actually are. And I think these insights can help us create wonderful interventions. Another piece is I think it can help us as clinicians create a container for ourselves that holds us really well. Oh, of course it makes sense this person is acting impulsively. Their lower brain is fast. There's nothing, I don't have to judge that. I don't have to think there's something wrong with them. I think we can create a really judgment free of coarseness container for folks. And then the other piece I think is that understanding a little bit of neurobiology can help people buy into therapy a little bit easier. It certainly helped me. I mean, I went into this field thinking this is a bunch of woo-woo BS, right? and the more I've gone into neurobiology, the more I understand all those woo-woo BS interventions are the ones that work best, by the way. But I needed that education to know. And as a client, that was really helpful for me. Just like as a clinician, it's really helpful for me. That's a piece of it. And I also think psychoeducation around this stuff can start taking some of the shame out. So I think we've been taught that we're supposed to show up without the brains that we actually have. Oh, my heart. It hurts so much when I think about like how much culturally we've been taught to judge ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm speaking with Jules Taylor Shore. Her book, Setting Boundaries That Stick, How Neurobiology Can Help You Rewire Your Brain to Feel Safe, Connected, and Empowered. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself how we can let ourselves off the hook when we're aware of certain ways our brain's working. Like, oh, okay. And that can really we can feel absolved from feeling like we're the cause,
Yeah.
Just let us off the hook some.
Yeah. And in a nuanced way, right? I can let go of the judgment and still do a thing that makes it better.
Right.
What if you could have both?
Right.
You don't have to have harshness to change. In fact, compassion is if you lean into Kristen Neff's work at all, y'all. Kristen Neff is a wonderful researcher in compassion research. And what she would say is, oh no, there's no way for any kind of long-lasting change to happen without compassion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. What's next for you? You said you're doing a lot of teaching and stuff.
I'm doing tons of teaching. So I just wrote this book. I'm letting people know about that. I run boundary workshops that are teeny tiny. I don't let more than 8 people in, so we can actually do depth work around all these boundary pieces. So I do that regularly. And then the big thing I'm doing right now is something called the STAIR method, which is not a model of therapy. I want to be really clear about that. The STAIR method is an integrative synthesizing framework so that you can put all those amazing therapy tools you have into a neurobiologically sound methodology. And so it's an integrative method. So it helps you organize your toolbox so that your skills work with the brain really well.
Wow, very interesting. And where can people learn more about that?
Yeah, you can learn all about everything from my website.
Okay.
JulianneTaylorShore.com. Julianne is spelled with one N. So look up juliannetaylorshore.com or Jules Taylor Shore on Google. You'll still find me because everybody calls me Jules, and that's all over my website too.
Okay.
And just check out my website. It's got all the therapist training, all the boundary workshops, which are for everybody. Any adult over the age of 25 is welcome. You could be a therapist, but it's open to lay folks as well. And and I have a book out. So if you want a low cost way to try on some of these ideas, that's a great way to do it.
Awesome. And we'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Jules, thank you so much. Intense, very intense. I mean,
yeah,
you are intense. I love it.
Oh, thanks, Guy.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. We'll be in touch. Take care.
All right.